Hello YouTube and welcome back to World of Warships with Wadres, and for today's video we are going to be discussing the Tier 5 British heavy cruiser, the Hawkins. Now, first off, let's look at the Hawkins armor profile. It's actually pretty interesting, and you can actually see a little bit of the texturing on the hull if you look closely enough. But going to the armor layout, she's actually a pretty well-protected little ship, if I do say so. Not the most protected. I mean, she's, like, not Russian or anything. But she's definitely got some interesting armor panels on her. Now, she is still lower tiers, so she does have 13 millimeters for the most part on her upper and lower front and bow and stern. But as far as all of that goes, that's really about as simple as the simplest she gets, because once you start looking at some of the other plating in various places, she's actually got a 16 millimeter deck, 10 millimeter superstructure. That's nothing really to shake a stick at now that I think about it. She does have a nice thick con tower, but the armor belt, front end, stern, hell, or stern, geez. Didn't even look at that earlier. That's a 57 millimeter stern belt, so she can actually stern tank pretty well as long as the shells don't go too high from enemy ships. But she's also got a nice 51 and 64 millimeter little side belts towards the rear there. 64 millimeter right under the con tower, and 38 millimeter bow plate, just that lower strip. So she's actually pretty well armored for all intents and purposes. And on top of that, she does also have a nice, reasonably thick 76 millimeter armor belt. But this basically means this is a ship that can do a good bit of bow tanking or even armor angling to just really troll with some heavier ships. Even battleships would have very difficult time overmatching the vast majority of her armor here. Unless, of course, they plunge straight through the bow, at which point all bets are off. But, I mean, how often does that little hit there ever actually happen? Not to say that it can't, just you've got, when you're looking at this ship from distance, you've got a very narrow piece here that's going to be very hard to hit. So her armor profile is rather nice, to be perfectly honest, and it does make for a nice, heavy Tier 5 ship. Closing that out, though, you can actually see the armor texture on the bow here with that little zigzag pattern. I mean, you can see it kind of perfectly contours right up in there. And even towards the stern, you do get a little bit of that armor sort of showing there as well. So she's got some pretty interesting armor going for her for a Tier 5, which is definitely saying something. That this is, again, armor on some levels that almost rivals battleships. Certainly capable of tanking them, that's for sure. Anyway, moving on. For her survivability, she does have a reasonable health pool. She does have a maximum health pool of 32,200 hit points for her B hull. The A hull is only 27,800 hit points. But, I mean, depending on how quickly you work your way through it, you don't have to worry about that anyway. And honestly, I can't say... Oh, sorry about that. I cannot say that I've had too many matches in her where the health pool was really a major concern for me, as long as I was, again, focusing on just bow tanking my targets or trolling shells into my armor belt. For this ship, that's really a negligible concern, to be perfectly honest, as long as you play her well. She does also possess a 10% torpedo damage reduction. As far as her artillery, she does have 7 single 191 millimeter batteries, 190 millimeter batteries. These have a 14-second reload, 180-degree rotation time of 18 seconds, and her maximum dispersion at max range with the aiming systems mod 1 is 120 meters. Her maximum HE shell damage is 3,050 and has a 15% chance of causing fire on target. And her maximum AP damage is 4,050. She also has a maximum firing range of 13.9 kilometers, fully upgraded. Baseline, it is 12.7 kilometers. And she does not benefit at all from any range increases from AFT or any modules either. So that's as good as her range gets. Overall, it's definitely very workable, though. For torpedoes, she does get 2 double launchers. They're nothing to really write home about overall, but I mean, torpedoes are still torpedoes. If you can get in and use them, I'd say still use them. They do have a 53-second reload, do 15,733 maximum damage, have a range of 5.6 kilometers, and are seen at 1.2 kilometers. And as far as her other stats here go, that 5.6 kilometers, I must note, is with torpedo acceleration added on. So that is with a 20% reduction to her range. Otherwise, she would be seeing like 6.5-ish, I believe. And her torpedo speed is 64 knots, again, with torpedo acceleration, 59 without. So if you're thinking that you might be using these torpedoes a little bit more regularly, I would definitely opt for torpedo acceleration, because otherwise these torpedoes are a little on the slow side. And if you're getting into close quarters where you're going to be brawling with torpedoes anyway, you're not going to worry too terribly much about 5.6 kilometer torpedo range. There are definitely shorter torpedo ranges in the game. Russian cruisers, I'm kind of looking at you there. But, I mean, they're definitely very, very workable. For AA, she does have a reasonably interesting array of AA guns. Her baseline short-range AA is 25 continuous damage per second. Her mid-range has a continuous damage per second of 70. And her long-range has a continuous damage of 25 with a flak burst damage of 910. She also only gets 1 flak burst for her A-hull AA armament. Moving up to her B-hull, however, her short-range AA unfortunately does go down to 21 damage per second, but her mid-range gets a major boost up to 126, and her long-range goes to 60 damage per second, and a 1,050 damage per second explosion burst, with 2 bursts per salvo. Her short range goes from 0.1 to 1.5 kilometers, mid-range goes from 0.1 to 2.5 kilometers, and her long range goes from all the way out to 5.8 kilometers. As far as her maneuverability, she does reach 30 knots on the surface without any bonuses or boosts. She does have a nice tight 640 meter turning circle, but it is tier 5 still, so cruisers are still relatively agile at this tier. And she has a 9.1 second rudder shift, and that is on the B hull. Her base rudder shift is 12.8 seconds. Finally, her concealment values. She is seen at 12.2 kilometers baseline on the surface, 6.4 kilometers from the air, and 6.9 kilometers after firing her main battery in smoke. On a side note, looking at my captain skills, I have not put a whole lot into these commanders. She does benefit very well from preventative maintenance. Again, the torpedoes do seem to do well with torpedo acceleration. I cannot as fast as her guns turn around, 18 seconds, they are quick enough where if you're turning, they will still track. So I would opt away from Expert Marksman and consider opting for other level 2 skills like potentially Jack of all trades, maybe High Alert, but I would also consider very highly Torpedo Acceleration just to give a little bit more out of your torpedoes, and Adrenaline Rush as another possibility to just increase your reload as the ship does still take damage. Other things that I would consider looking at moving forward with this commander as this commander develops, I would definitely consider possibly Demo Expert to increase your fire chance. Maybe Superintendent so that you get an extra heal or DFAA charge. At Tier 5, I wouldn't really consider Survivability Expert to be terribly viable. Concealment Expert with 12.6 kilometers at Tier 5. Yeah, I would definitely say Concealment Expert for one of your first Tier 4 points. And given that she doesn't really benefit from either AFT or BFT really, unless you're really looking at AA skills, I would opt possibly for radiolocation or maybe even fire prevention. And I'm also saying this to skip away from the IFHE debacle at the moment because there are some IFHE changes that have been announced that are going to be coming relatively soon. And as such, well, relatively soon, meaning it could be within the next 2 or 3 patches for all I know, but it is coming soon. And again, she's a heavier cruiser, so she doesn't really benefit from IFHE the way other cruisers really would. It doesn't really push her past too many major thresholds that I am aware of, even at this tier. So there's that just to throw out there for you. Again, if you want to bolster your AA, you could go for BFT and AFT, but I do think you might get a little bit better utility from Concealment Expert, and again, maybe Fire Prevention or something else for your Tier 4 skills. As far as her upgrades are concerned, I would definitely look at Main Armaments Mod 1. She is a heavy cruiser, so you do want to bonus that as much as you can. With 9.1 coming out tomorrow, Propulsion Mod 1 and Steering Gears Mod 1 are actually going to be combined into one. So I would definitely go with your engine control systems, or whatever it is they're calling it now. That new upgrade module to just increase your overall engine and steering gear survivability. I don't see her benefiting too terribly much from damage control. She is a cruiser, so she does have reduced fire duration and things like that compared to larger ships. So I think damage control really wouldn't benefit her too terribly much. And she is a cruiser, so I would opt for Aiming Systems Mod 1. Either that or maybe the new and improved AA Guns mod that is going to be coming out again tomorrow with 9.1, which is a 20% reduction to priority sector preparation time, as opposed to the current 2 salvo or 2 explosion bonus. So there is that to be said as well, but again, personally, I'm more concerned with aiming accuracy, so I would personally opt for Aiming Systems Aiming Systems Mod 1. Beyond that, there's really not much else to be said about her as a Tier 5 ship for her stat bonuses, so let's go ahead and take her on into battle. So I suppose I should really just kind of get it out of the way and say that as a Tier 5 heavy cruiser, I actually very much enjoyed the Hawkins. It is, dare I say, everything that I would look for in a heavy cruiser. It has armor, it has decent guns, and I mean, the armor that it has is even under the right circumstances, trollish to even most of the battleships she's going to be facing off against at her tier, even up to some of the tier 7s that she could face off against at tier, if she ends up as a bottom tier player. I mean, even if she were up against a Scharnhorst with so little thin armor plates that are actually exposed to the Citadel, she's perfectly capable of tanking all kinds of shells so long as she's not hit with a whole lot of overly accurate gunfire. And when you're taking on the vast majority of other ships that she's going to be facing off against, like cruisers or destroyers, she really just has more armor than is really necessary to deal with the vast majority of them. I mean, even her 13mm bow is more than capable of bouncing off your standard heavy cruiser calibers. So there's not a whole lot that you really need to worry about in this ship as far as I've noticed. You can kind of YOLO in, be a little bit crazy if you really feel like it, and just enjoy playing the ship. You're not having, as long as you make a conscious awareness of your armor angling against some of the heavier ships that you may be facing, like, say, Synop, you're really not going to be hurting too much. And even then, as long as you're aware of your positioning, keep moving, keep either trolling shells into your armor belt or even just making sure that enemy shots miss entirely, you're really going to be just in good shape running this ship. On top of the fact that she does have those relatively quick reload two double launcher torpedoes, you've really just got a lot of things working in this ship's favor that could very much keep her on a even playing field with even higher tier ships. So I definitely think she is a ship that players starting their way through the heavy cruisers for the British line are definitely going to enjoy, just because she's got staying power, something that a lot of other tier 5 cruisers really lack. To put it the way the Mighty Jingles phrases it, most tier 5 cruisers are made up of citadels and with paper for armor soaked in gasoline. Well, I can say with certainty that the Hawkins, for all intents and purposes, breaks that stereotype. It's a very, very nice, solid, heavy cruiser for tier 5. And something that I think the game has actually desperately needed at the exact mid-tier for a good long while, actually. I mean, as things go, as I was getting used to the ship, starting to realize I could get away with more and more, especially against other ships, other cruisers, you'll see through the gameplay that I just started getting more and more bold with some of the targets that I was choosing to go after, especially knowing that in many cases, especially in the last match, I'm going to go challenge an Iron Duke and a New York, basically almost going at them head on, and really not absorb too much damage as consequence, just because either they're focusing on other targets or quite simply the amount of damage that they're capable of doing to me is minimal based on how I'm oriented. You're really going to be good in this ship, provided you don't just go and make a whole hell of a lot of mistakes, like showing broadside to a battleship, or showing that nice flat broadside to other cruisers. As long as you stay angled, use your armor effectively, that this ship will last you and serve you very, very well. The second match that's going on in the background right here. The first match really wasn't the greatest tell because there was that was such a short-lived match it wasn't even funny. But coming into second match here, this is tier 6 straight matchmaking, I believe. Tier 6, tier 5. And, I play very much the way I would any other heavy cruiser. I'm ducking, weaving, making sure that my track is not too easy to predict for the most part. And where I do eat hits, a lot of them are hitting for almost minimal damage, just because the amount of armor is there, where some hits either do hit thin armor and just penetrate, or they just straight up shatter against some of the heavier armor. And in other cases, I'm just very well aware of what I need to be doing as far as ducking and weaving in the first place, where shells aren't even really hitting me in a few cases. The Warspite that I'm trying to charge down right now had barely done anything to me at all. In fact, the one salvo I think that it actually did try to hit me with, I think it's going to try and shoot another one at me here in just a moment from its rear turrets. Yeah. I mean, granted, that could have been a very poorly aimed shot, but again, just because of my maneuvering more than anything else, those shells just didn't do much of anything. And actually, I think that was a front turret salvo that just hit me, and again, the amount of damage that I took from it was minimal, and the damage that I did take was probably absorbed through the upper bow plating, where it is still relatively thin. The shells that hit lower didn't even bother penetrating. They just did not have thin enough armored overmatch. So, I mean, I can't entirely call it a little ship now, can I? But this ship does have staying power, and I think, again, I think players are going to enjoy her. She is a very nice, dare I say, introduction to the British heavy cruisers in a number of ways. Now, I am going to warn you, having played through the other 3 that are in early access right now, I cannot say with good confidence that this is an experience that is going to carry over for the rest of the line. But I am going to say the Hawkins does at least lend herself to being a good starting experience for the British heavy cruiser line. And sometimes that's all you really need sometimes, is a good starting point. Just to get the line moving, I guess. And again, the other thing I'm also going to say is that Tier 5 especially, we've needed a tankier ship. I don't mind if the ships at the higher tiers are a little bit squishier for whatever reason. We've needed a nice, tanky, heavy cruiser at the midline for a good long while now, and I do think the Hawkins does thankfully fulfill that role very well. Now, I am not going to come out here and say that the Hawkins is all fun and games. She does still have some shortcomings. Again, she does still have that very thin upper strip of bow armor where if enemy shells hit that, the chances of overmatch are very high, especially from battleships, so there is that to be wary of. She does have somewhat small gun caliber, 190s versus what would otherwise be 203s for most other class or tech lines. Although I do think the 190 is also a little bit bigger than a couple of the other tech lines. I think the Omaha still has 155s. I could be wrong. But, I mean, they're not stellar, but they're nothing to shake a stick at either. They're certainly going to do damage when and where they need to. They just may lack a little bit of penetration if under the wrong circumstances, maybe? Just because they are a little bit smaller than most. Here, I think for this ship, especially if you end up tiered, the one thing you're relying on more than anything else is your overall fire potential with your HE shells, as opposed to your raw damage output at any rate. So there is that to be said. The other thing is she does have that very limited torpedo armament, only having one double launcher per side. But again, those torpedoes do reload reasonably quick, and as long as you are careful with your maneuvering, positioning, and timing, overall she really does not suffer from having that very, very limited torpedo armament. In fact, in some cases, she can actually be a little bit more versatile than other cruisers because she has such small torpedo launchers. all of that having been said, purely because of her very strong armor scheme, her, I guess I could almost say mid-caliber guns by comparison to other cruisers, and just overall capabilities, the Hawkins is very capable at Tier 5, very enjoyable to play at Tier 5, and I'm not sure what else to say about her. She is a very strong entry at Tier 5. Do I think she's overpowered? No, not by a long shot. If anything, I believe that she is the strong Tier 5 for tech lines that's actually been needed for a while, as I've already mentioned once or twice. So, I'd say, if anything, Wargaming should probably just leave her as her is. She's, again, something that the game has needed for a while, just to kind of breathe a little bit of longevity into the game from the cruiser standpoint. Give players something that they can maybe be a little bit tankier with as far as cruisers would go. And, I really do not have anything overtly bad to say about this ship. She is just all around everything that I think a Tier 5 cruiser needs right now. The other thing is, the more that I pushed the ship, the more it just seemed like it rewarded that gameplay. The more I pushed in, the better she rewarded me. She rewards a much more aggressive playstyle than some other equal tier cruisers would otherwise allow for. Again, purely because her armor scheme is tankier. Her guns are very capable. And her torpedoes, again, while not exactly ideal, are extremely usable under the right circumstances. And as long as you use them well, you can really bring them out to make this ship an incredibly strong force to be reckoned with overall. On that note, I really don't think I have a whole lot more that I can say. I've still got a whole other battle on this video for all of you to enjoy. So I suppose I'll just go ahead and let you all enjoy it. I've said my piece as far as this ship goes. I think those of you who play her are definitely going to enjoy her. She's just a very fun little ship. On that note, I suppose I will in fact let you all enjoy this last match. For those of you who are new to my channel, I hope you all enjoy I hope you all enjoyed it. If you also enjoyed it, please do not forget to like and subscribe, and that should get you access to notifications to any future content that I put out. I suppose I will take a little bit of a moment as a side note here to just talk about something that some people may not even see if they don't even get this far in the video at all, is that we do have Update 9.1 coming out. It's going to be the conclusion of the Britishcruisers event, so all of the British heavy cruisers are going to be available for research. Part of why I'm trying to rush this video out right now. Overall, I have gotten the 4 that are currently in early access. I'm not finding too many bad experiences with them. Overall, I think, just like other ships, they do have their strengths, they do have their weaknesses. You just have to know how to play them right. It's just a matter of finding that right playstyle in the first place. Other than that, I guess I'll let that be my final say for the night. I'll let you all go. I wish you all happy hunting, and I hope you all enjoy the last little bit of this video. Have a good one, folks.
Fire! Torpedoes dead ahead. We sank an enemy cruiser.
Anti-aircraft gun crews are on full alert. Torpedoes to starboard.
Our team has taken the lead.
Anti-aircraft gun crews are on normal alert.
The enemy battleship destroyed.
Fire! Problem solved, sir.
Victory is in sight.
Hull breach. We're taking on water. Problem solved,